This is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM. And we have with us at WZRD via Zoom, Jim Kaczmarek, saxophonist and a very, very talented musician for a long, long time. And he has his group, Event Horizon Jazz Quartet. We were playing a couple of tracks from Event Horizon, the album that Jim and his group of Event Horizon Jazz Quartet put out in 2021. And I think the last track was Evening Mist. Welcome, Jim. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Very, very well. Thank you. We saw that you became smitten with the saxophone at a very, very young age. How did that come to be?
Well, I started playing saxophone when I was 10, so for 50 years now. I was very fortunate to have parents that really, really loved music. And my uncle tells me a story of my mom sitting on top of the wood stove with her ear up against the radio, listening to the Grand Ole Opry on Sunday nights. And she played Hawaiian guitar and keyboard. And then my father, who was kind of a Renaissance genius, listened to music all the time. And so in his shop, when he was creating the artwork he was doing or whatever he was working on, you might hear classical, American Indian music, polka music, jazz. He gave me the Revolver album when I was very young. And so I was always immersed with music. I do not remember a time when I did not like the saxophone. So there's not some like aha moment where I was watching and I saw a saxophone. I remember seeing a picture of, on my older sister's band folder. But the only answer I can give about saxophone is that I always wanted to play saxophone. I always loved the way that it sounded, and that so many different people could sound so different on it, I guess. So it's what I always wanted to do.
Why is it that different people sound different on the saxophone? It's almost as if everybody has their own speaking voice. Does that speaking voice actually affect, or is it the breathing? Everybody's different breathing affects the sound of the saxophone.
That's a really good question. It's a combination of physics, obviously. The inside of our mouth and our throat and our larynx. I'm not going to say that word because I'll mispronounce it.
Larynx?
Laryngeal passage. I don't know, but the construction of our mouth, everyone's is different. And so how you shape the sound comes from that, but it's actually what you're hearing in your head. Great saxophonist Dave Liebman basically said that, has shown and demonstrated that really the sound is all in the mouthpiece and the neck of the horn, but it's made by what we're hearing in our head. And so kind of like Bob Dylan sounds completely different than Billie Holiday, or sounds different than it's very saxophone. I think all instruments can do this, but for me, saxophone seemed to be the one that had the widest variety. Even if people were connected to each other, there still is difference in the way they sound, whether it's John Coltrane or Dexter Gordon or Sonny Rollins or Stan Getz. So there's a wide variety of sounds that one can get. And the way you articulate, the way we pronounce words, that's why I like talking to people and actually hearing them rather than texting them for the most part, because you hear the rhythm and you can hear the nuance of the sound.
When you say that, it's also when you play the saxophone, what's important is what this you hear in your head as well. Is that what you're aiming for when you play? What you hear in your head?
Yes, ideally that what at least what I'm striving for, but I think most musicians are striving for, though I dare that I comment for them. But yeah, we're trying to get our instrument to do what we imagine we want to sound like in our head. It's kind of like, my father was an artist, a painter. We did all sorts of things, but I remember in my time trying to paint, because it intrigues me. And I was painting these orange lilies with watercolor, and watercolor is very, very difficult. But first painting I painted, I looked at it and I go, well, that doesn't really look like what it is. And as I subsequent attempts, like 5 or 6 attempts, what I learned not only was you have to have the technique of the brush and the paint and the water and all that, you also are are getting better at seeing. So I think we're always striving to get better at hearing what we're imagining, and trying to be as creative as possible is part of being as honest and true to yourself as you can. So I'm always trying to get to the point where what I hear is what I can play.
Mhm. And does that relate to other instruments as well?
I believe so. I believe it, I believe no matter what instrument, even when you're singing, it's all coming from our brain. It's all coming from our conception. It's all coming from our imagination. And so, I've taught many years, many different students, and that's really what I'm trying to go for, to get them to be able to hear what they're going to play, because that affects your sound, it affects your style, it affects everything, and it makes it more personal.
Mhm. Well, you have taught at Northern Illinois University and developed a jazz theory curriculum with Fareed Haque. What you were telling me now, how much of that trying to envision what one's voice wants to be, what that playing the instrument should be, what the ideal sound is for the individual student. How does that tie in with the curriculum that you created?
Well, I helped create it. I wouldn't say that I created it. When I was at Northern, my assistantship was teaching jazz theory, and I learned in a way, I don't know if you'd say Eurocentric, but in a way that I'm not necessarily convinced is I don't know if there is a best way, but I learned you read it, and so theory can be very text oriented, very not involved in the practicality of actually playing the instrument. And when I was studying with Fareed and teaching there, we team taught the second year that I taught the theory class, two of them, and he was much more into getting it on the instrument as quick as possible, which makes sense that, of course I'm dumb and I learn along the way. So that all relates to that. A scale or a chord doesn't really mean anything per se on a piece of paper. It only means something when you can actually get it to speak out of your instrument, and get it to so you're understanding it in a playing situation or in a compositional situation.
I learned music theory before, and I found it very difficult because there was a lot of math involved, and is that what you're speaking of? Being too immersed in the math side of it would prevent the student from actually playing that note, or but still the student needs to understand the note that the student is playing, and that requires understanding the music theory behind it. So how to bridge that fine line?
That's the never-ending problem, because if obviously it's a mistake to think that people like Coltrane didn't study, and he pondered over the Slonimsky thesaurus of melodic patterns, and he obviously could play scales and chords, but it's I'm sorry, I got lost. Can you say your question again?
How to bridge the fine line between understanding the mechanics and the math in music theory.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's getting to a point. It's getting it to a point where it's not rote, where there's some education where it's like, oh, you play this scale over this chord, you play this scale over this chord, and that's not like Steve Coleman. When I talked to him, he said that it's about where you're going, and so he talks about when he's doing different melodic patterns or cells, that there are different pathways to get through the chords, and so you have to or I shouldn't say have to, because I don't want to be pedantic, but it's good to have a philosophical sense and intent in what you're doing, that because Charlie Parker, even though he practiced the upper extensions and he did all that, it really was a language. And so when we're talking now, and I got lost, which happens, Herbie Hancock said that that's the way the Miles Davis quintet in the 60s was, that you might start talking about something here, but you end up over there. But that's kind of like where you want to get in music, so that you have at least for me, so that you can have this discussion, and it can go all sorts of places. And even though we know how to construct sentences, we know as you live more and read more and experience more and listen to more, you have a bigger vocabulary and you have bigger understanding of the multiple meanings of the way you put things, the way the words are put together. The same thing with music. You want to have, it's kind of like Sonny Rollins said, you practice it and then you forget it and you start playing. So you want to get to the point where it's kind of like you're just drawing on it. You're not thinking like, I'm not thinking, oh, what verb will I use next? What, phrase am I going to say next in this interview? How will I, where will I put a comma or where will I put a pause? I mean, sometimes that's very organized, like I forget the name of the Christopher Walken. He used to, the way he got so many, he became so known as an actor, is that he would actually, when you get a script, he'd erase all the punctuation and he'd put his own punctuation in where it wasn't supposed to be. And so that's kind of thought out. But I think that like Cannonball was just playing what he felt and what he heard. And like the bass player, when he was playing with the Rolling Stones, I think it was Daryl Jones, so that he learned that it's really about how it feels. And that's really what's important, how it feels.
So when jazz, oh, that's okay. When jazz players jam together, is that what they're going off of, what you just described? They don't think it, they just find the feel where it has to go, and then they play where how they feel. How does that work?
Well, yeah, you're right. It's no, feel is like it's more, when people say, oh, play what you feel, it's much deeper than just what you feel. But yes, when it depends on, like, if one goes to a jam session, there's a set of standard tunes that most people know. And so if you're playing a blues, most people know what the chord progression is for the blues, and just know what key it's in, and you can play with each other. But then you have to be cognizant of where the time is. In other words, where the rhythm is, so you can lock in with where the drummer is and the bass player, and so that the rhythm is, the time is together, the rhythm is together, and so it feels really good. It's kind of like when you're talking to friends that you've been with, that you've known for a long time. You can have conversations, and you don't necessarily talk over each other, but you interrupt each other, but it's still moving forward. You're not interrupting in a way that's detrimental. It's kind of like you just know each other's rhythm and you can continue on. And that's what you ideally get in a musical situation. And when they jam and they don't know each other, but they know the language, they know enough of the language, enough of what's going on, so that they can play together.
When you taught jazz theory and at the Northern, did you also teach about the jamming as well? About the what? About jamming sessions.
Oh, jam sessions. Yeah, talked about playing with each other. Talked about playing tunes with each other. Talking about, and of course, listening to recordings and transcribing, which is when we're very, very young, we learn how to speak by copying the people that are around us that are talking, and so it's really important to grab stuff from recordings. Like, so, and that's basically how, Charlie Parker learned a lot of Lester Young solos, and then people who came after Charlie Parker, like Phil Woods, etc., grabbed a lot of Charlie Parker's stuff, and Coltrane learned a lot of Charlie Parker's stuff, and then, so which gave me my respect for history, because if you study somebody, you have to look at who they listen to and then who they listen to. So yes.
How did you get your first break as a professional musician? That was when you were 16 years old?
Yeah, I don't know whether I've ever had, I think I'm constantly getting breaks, because the guys in Event Horizon Jazz Quartet, they put up with me, and they make my music come to life. And Scott makes the music, he writes wonderful songs or tunes, and Rick and Donnie have they're very creative, and so they make things happen. So that's a break that I've been able to play with them for about 6 or 7 years now. When I was 16, there was a group that was called Take Five that when I was in high school with guys called Paul Minch, a wonderful saxophone player. He played piano as well. Gary Kirst, who's now a pastor somewhere. I haven't seen any of these guys in 40 years or whatever. But we played some, private parties and things like that. And we played standards, and I think Paul had written a tune. They were very good guys. It was nice for them to let me play with them. And then along the way, there have been many situations like where I did my student teaching. I taught with Ron DeVillers, who just recently passed away, but he had a good jazz big band in Milwaukee, and he also led the Packer band. So once I was there, then he had me play in that band. I met this guitar player called Jack Grassel in Milwaukee, an amazing guitarist rather. And then we put a band together called Kinetic Shower, and he was in my band for a while. And then when I moved to, of course, I learned a lot from Fareed Haque and from Steve Duke, and from everybody that I've met along the way. And then in Illinois, I met a trumpet player called Carlo, and he got me the break of playing with, I played with the Buckinghams for a while. And then all the people that hire the band, or like WZRD, who plays our music a lot, which is, so wonderful, so to share our music with other people. So I had a break last week where I got to play in Steve Hashimoto's quartet at Ravenswood Tavern, and I had never played with Heath Chappell, the wonderful drummer, and Steve, of course, many times in various situations, but Pat Fleming, the guitar player on that gig, I had never played with him before, and that was really fun. So that was a break because I learned. It was an experience.
Well, when you were 16, the other people that were your bandmates, how old were they compared to you?
Oh, they were all in high school. And then I neglected to mention one. There was a big band called the Mark Cleckley Big Band. Unfortunately, he passed away a few years after that from an asthma attack. But in that group, I got to play with college kids that were in the band as well as pros. And I was in high school. And I got to meet Jay Manning, this wonderful saxophonist, who the Last Blue Jay, the song that's on the record, is dedicated to him. So those guys were in college, and I got to play on, when I first went to UWM, I guess Tom Dvorak, the director, gave me kind of a break. I got to play the alto saxophone solo on David Amram's Concerto for Jazz Alto Saxophone and Wind Ensemble, and that was really fun. David Amram, of course, great French hornist composer who's played with a lot of heavy people.
And then how did you come to teach at Northern?
When I turned 30, because I'm old, when I turned, though old isn't bad because some people don't make it to 60. When I turned 30, I looked at my life and I thought, okay, I'm in Milwaukee. I had my own band, Kinetic Shower, that had a house gig at John Hawk's Pub. I was playing in the Packer band, played some shows with the Milwaukee Symphony. And I thought, okay, what's going to be different in 10 years from now? And I decided, well, I should go back to school and learn what I'm awful at, because there's a litany of things. And so I can start pecking away at those things that I'm awful at. The farther you travel, the less you know. And I had met Steve Duke, the saxophone teacher at Birch Creek, and I thought I always wanted to study with him. And so I ended up applying to a handful of schools, and I ended up going to Northern to study with him. And my assistantship there was to teach jazz theory, so that so that's how I ended up there. And then I moved. I was either going to move to New York or Chicago, and I chose Chicago.
Then how did you come to work with Fareed Duke in developing a jazz curriculum at Northern?
Oh, Fareed, I team taught with him. He team taught the jazz theory, and so I helped organize it. We never really wrote it down or anything. We just organized what it was, because he was steering it, because Professor Ron Carter had just become the head of jazz studies there my second year there.
And at that time, at what point was it in Fareed's career at that time when he started?
He had already played with Sting, and he was at that time he was playing in a band with Joe Zawinul from Weather Report. I think it was called Weather Update. but he was an amazing guitar player, and I learned an awful lot from him. It was one of those teachers that was very honest with you. So like if you sounded bad, he told you that you sounded bad. So which is, I think, beneficial. I'm not a fan of that movie with the drummer where he's just screaming at the students, but I never found it helpful for an educator or for anyone who's trying to be your mentor. Dave Liebman's the same way, that tells you, oh, you're great today. Oh, you're great today. That doesn't help. You want someone to tell you with love what's wrong and so how you can get better, you know.
Joining us is Bill Morton, president of the Rogers Park Chamber of Commerce and also a wizard broadcaster on another day. Welcome, Bill.
Hello, welcome, Wizard, and thank you, Wizard, and welcome, Jim. Nice to see you here.
Nice to see you, sir.
Very cool. We saw each other recently, and it's always we met recently in person, and but we've been chatting online. We've been you know, through the music and through the Wizard for years, and it's been a wonderful trip so far.
Well, thank you. It has been very well. It's interesting having you in my living room right now, in my music room rather. But
so speaking of your living room or your music room, I hear some little guys chirping in the background. Who are they?
oh, I've got a lovebird and their name, because I'm not really gender specific. Haven't had them sex. Their name is Buster. After the great comedian Buster Keaton, because when I first, they're a little bit less than 2 years old, and when I first got Buster, before they were attached to me, now they'll fly to me and stay with me. Buster will stay with me no matter, whatever. It flies around the room but comes back. He would jump on the floor and then run around. He ran around the room, did laps behind the stereo and TV, under the fish tank, and it took me about 2 hours to get him. But it was hilarious to watch him run, even though it was frustrating. So that's who's making the noise. My fish don't make very much noise.
So that you're in your music room. Is this your listening room, or is this your study room? Is this where you write your music? Do you record at home at all for either recordings or probably not recordings, but for like composing, to take notes?
Well, I sometimes I teach and do clinics sometimes from this room. My keyboard is in this room. All my CDs and records are in this room. I do actually have a stereo in here, but the stereo, which sounds nice, but my actual listening room is a different room. But I call this a music room because I sometimes practice in here. My keyboard's in here for when I write or when I arrange, and I do sometimes practice in here, but I sometimes practice in the other room too, because that's where my nice speakers are and my nice turntable. So, but yeah, I've got too many CDs and records.
You look like the Wizard with the CDs all over the place. You look like you're at Wizard.
Yeah.
So is it okay? I remember you did a promo for Wizard. I believe it was our Valentine's Day promo for Sunday Morning Wizard, and you said saxophonist, and the Wizard's calling you a saxophonist. Which one is it?
Probably most people say saxophonist, but the reason why I say saxophonist is because that's what Dexter Gordon said. And when my father was really cool, and he took me to hear people like Stan Getz and Dexter Gordon a handful of times, and Dexter had a great way about him, besides the way that he played, but he would hold his saxophone up in front of him and he would say, and your tenor saxophonist is Dexter Gordon. And so that's where that came from. That's my personal homage to Dexter. Okay. I like playing with words, so that's,
And then why Event Horizon? I know you have the album. The name of the band is Event Horizon Jazz Quartet. The name of the album is Event Horizon, and the name of one of my favorite songs on the album is Event Horizon. So what is the significance of the Event Horizon?
Thank you. I'm kind of a physics and science geek, even though I don't have enough time to know very much about it. I've got a really nice telescope that I haven't figured out how to use yet. And the Event Horizon is where is the region outside of a black hole where once you're to that event horizon, there's no going back.
Mhm.
And so I thought it was, and we don't really totally understand what happens when you get sucked in. And finally thought that it was gone, but then the energy doesn't come out, and there's different understandings of that. And so I thought that was a cool idea to have, to that hopefully that the people that listen to the music that we put out are drawn to it in a way, not necessarily crushed, but drawn to it in a way that, and they don't really know where they're going to end up, but it's okay.
In my understanding of the Event Horizon, I'm a fan as well of Event Horizons.
Yeah.
There's two theories that I've heard.
Yeah.
One is it's a wormhole, and it will take you with Einstein's theory of relativity.
Right.
It folds, and it's a quick path to the other side of the universe. Another one is and
that works as well, right?
And another one is when you reach the event horizon, it's faster. Light can't even escape it.
Correct.
And so when it's pulling your body, the part closest goes further, faster, and they call that spaghettification, where it just pulls you and you turn into spaghetti. I don't know.
I like the word spaghettification.
Kind of like saxophone.
I'm gonna have to write a tune called spaghettification.
Yeah, that's the term the scientists use.
I know that's cool.
Yeah. So event horizon and the black holes.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, I when I retire, which won't be for too long from I'll never retire from playing. Kind of like envision myself like Warren Marsh dying on the stool during a gig. But I intend to learn how to use my telescope and spend a lot more time jumping into science.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So okay, so that's the point of no return. So in your career and with your band, what is the point of no return for you? Making the album was like you're going to do a lot of gigs, you're going to make more albums, you're going to go in that direction, and you were going to go a different direction or something.
Well, we're working on our second record right now. We're playing at Northman on the Riverwalk from 3 to 5 this Friday. And we're going to be playing a lot of the new music there. It's kind of life for me, and I didn't think of this. It's really about the process. I found that my dad modeled that, and so I really enjoy the process of learning, and in an open-ended way where you don't actually know where it's going to end up. Even though George Harrison wrote that song, if you don't would know where you're going, any road will take you there. So there is some direction, but I'm just trying to get better. We're trying to get better at conceptualizing what we hear and then make people feel good or think or sad or happy with the music that we create. And so I want to have more of the tunes that I wrote recorded so that I can we can share them with more people and touch more people, I guess so that obviously the CD partially helps to get more jobs, but it certainly isn't about getting rich or making a lot of money. Even though, it's more about creating something and putting it out in the world and sharing it, because that's I guess that's what it is. Share more music.
So I've known you for a while, and I was listening to the interview earlier in this interview. So could you tell us a little bit about your teaching gigs? Why teach?
Why teach? To learn. That's one of it. That's the selfish reason. The real reason is I think that Dalai Lama said this, but you can look at Beatles, you can look at Martin Luther King. We're on this earth to help each other, and so I kind of look at being able to teaching as being able to help other people, because I've taught of all ages, to learn how to think them for themselves and to find the value in their own creativity and the value of thinking creatively and being able to have some direction in their lives. It's a real thrill to see a student get turned on to something like, some of the students I had this past year. I teach in a Chicago public K through 8 school, pre-K through 8 school, and I had some incredible band students this year. There's a handful of really good bass players, and one of them, they all practice, which is amazing. But one of them, she told me that, Mr. Kaz, I fell asleep last night with the bass in my hand, or I couldn't go to bed because I was trying to figure this out. And when you see somebody get that excited, or to get excited when they get something, or learn about mistakes. There were two clarinet players a while ago who were playing a duet, and they stopped, and this is during practice, isn't during a performance. And the one said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Kaz, I stopped, but I said, well, you knew you were going to do something wrong, right?" I said, "Well, that's great, because you're learning." Because where's that the people that are some of the people that the same, I'm sorry, the same skill you need to be good at something is the same skill you need to know that you're not. And so when somebody realizes that they're doing something not the way you intended, that's the way you learn. So right when someone has that skill, they're kind of like on their way. So that's why I teach. And it's a thrill to have kids play great. I mean, in my various situations, whether it was when I was at Northern, or when I've taught in Chicago, or when I taught at Evanston, or when I did the South Shore Youth Jazz Ensemble, it was all, it's a thrill. And to see some kids go on and do great things is amazing, even though it has nothing to do with me. We have never had a dog in my apartment.
That's little Joe.
Hey, Joe.
Little Joe, the red dog.
So, should I share more about the teaching, or?
Sure, yes.
Okay, well, I think you sent me the questions this morning, and when I was at Evanston, the kids were great. That was from 2005. I had to quit when my father became ill, and but I did it was a cool program, because there were three jazz ensembles and about a dozen combos, and I directed the second jazz ensemble and the top combo, and the combo won a Downbeat Award one of those years. And then when I went to Northern, one of the and this was after Northern, because Northern was 93 to 95. That's where I met Professor Carter, and Ron started this South Shore Youth Jazz Ensemble. And I'm sure I wasn't the first person he asked, but he asked me if I would be his assistant director, and eventually I became the co-director. That ran for about 12 years. And that was an awesome situation, because we took kids that were out, they had kids ranging in age from 12 to 22. And there were some awesome students that went through there, Isaiah Spencer, who plays drums around town, great drummer. Norm Palm, a phenomenal trombone player. Brian Carter, of course, the drummer, who's Ron's son. He does incidental music for Saturday Night Live, and he's scoring the Some Like It Hot musical. And of course, Marquise Hill, a great trumpet player, who, when he auditioned for us, I remember Ron and I looking at each other going, "Oh my gosh, if this guy practices," this was when he was 12, "he's going to be something." And he's one of those students that just works very, very hard. And now he's one of the, he's on cover of magazines, and he plays in Marcus Miller's band, and he's teaching at Berkeley. And so it's kind of I don't claim any claim of why he got to where he was. It's nice being a piece of the puzzle, but it's I kind of look at teaching as the way Wayne Shorter looks at it, where you're at a parade, and the people that you're teaching are on your shoulders, so they can see further down than you can.
You described teaching at Evanston Township High School. You also taught at the Chicago Public Schools as well.
Correct. Yeah, I've done general music and instrumental music there. Yes.
For 25 years?
Yeah, I came to Chicago I taught in Milwaukee for 7 years, and I took a leave of absence to get my master's degree. And then it was either going to be New York or Chicago, and I chose Chicago since my family was still alive then, and I still played in Milwaukee, and it was less expensive than New York.
Mhm.
And so I've been teaching in Chicago since '95. Yeah,
Mhm.
long time.
Do you have any students that because of what you taught them, they became interested in becoming a musician, and maybe they hit it big? Do you have any students that you know that?
Well, right, as I said, I said some from that went through the South Shore Youth Jazz Ensemble. They made it huge. There's a student, just one, pick one story, but or two, I guess. There's a young drummer way back when I first started in Chicago who I helped him, but he worked very hard. There was a program that the Chicago Symphony had with the percussionists, and I told him and his mom, who worked at the school at the time, that you get him in this, if he gets in this program and you audition to get in the program, and he does everything they say, I said he'll be able to write his ticket to go to school. And I was no longer teaching there when I taught there, I think, for like 7 years. I was no longer teaching there when he graduated from high school, but I went back there with actually the South Shore Youth Jazz Ensemble. We performed there, and I saw his mom, and his mom called him, and he came up to the school, gave me a big hug, and she told me that he just graduated from high school. Of course, that made me feel old at the time, and that's already a long time ago. And he had offers the free rides for 3 different schools, and so those kind of things really, that makes it completely worthwhile. And so I don't know whether he's playing music now or not, though, as I said, a lot of people from South Shore are. But then I think music is for everyone, and everybody should, if I had my own kids, I tell my students this, they would play a musical instrument just like they'd learn how to do math or learn how to read. And there's another student that I'm very difficult about letting people quit band, because I never run into anybody who says, oh, I played clarinet when I was in 5th grade or 7th grade and I quit. Thank heavens I quit. I always hear, that, boy, I wish I would have stuck with it. And I also know how good it is for your brain development scientifically. So there's one student that I remember now. I don't think she's playing anymore, but it has such benefit in the way you think. And she had, when she started, she would hide her flute under her bed. She would figure out all sorts of reasons not to bring the flute to school, so she didn't have to participate in band. This was when she was in grade school. But then when she got to high school, like when she was in 8th grade, she started getting kind of more interested in it, started practicing. But then I got cards from her every year with pictures of her in the marching band, and saying how much playing the flute helped her going forward. So when those kind of things happen, it's like, you feel it in your heart, chokes you up. It's an amazing thing.
Well, earlier when you were discussing your parakeet, when you practice on the saxophone, what does your parakeet do?
Well, it's a lovebird. That's all right. I've had parakeets or budgeriggers, but it depends. I forgot, the lovebird I had before Buster was called Gandhi, and Gandhi was incredibly peaceful. That's why I named Gandhi that, even though Gandhi wasn't completely consistent in the real world with his piece. I have forgotten how boisterous and loud birds are when they're really young. So sometimes when I'm practicing, Buster just starts yelling. And if they're sitting on my shoulder, they've got to go down my hands and peck at the horn. And so, but sometimes as he's gotten older, he's not old yet, he's going to be 2 in October, but he's starting to realize that if I don't pay attention to them right away, when he starts yelling, he quiets down.
Well, I guess maybe he's trying to sing as well. And then
Yes.
also when he's picking at your hand, maybe he wants to play as well. Because,
oh yes, lovebirds are unbelievably curious. They want to be part of everything you're doing.
For instance, Bill mentioned that Joel always taps because Bill is always typing, and then maybe Joel wants to type as well.
That's, animals are incredible. I think that we don't give them credit for what how incredibly smart they are. They're amazing.
When students do they come to you for advice and then for career advice? And when they do, what do you tell them?
You ask difficult questions. They're
Sorry
good
about that.
questions. They're good questions because you have to think about them. Yes, I really truly believe music is about life. And I think learning music is about learning how to live. That's what I think anyways. And so whether, practicing and figuring out how to learn something and being able to listen to yourself critically and then fix or work on fixing your problems and realizing that you're never ever done. Those are all things that are completely applicable to everything somebody does. And so one of the reasons why I push kids to learn how to play an instrument, besides learning how to hear and learning all those things, is that you really learn how to learn. And if we learn how to learn, there's really nothing that we can't figure out for the most part. And so, but my one of the things that was touching to me over the years is that some kids would say, why are we talking about this when this is music class, or why are we learning this one? But I would explain it, but many of them would understand how everything was, oh, that's connected to this. And I tried to explain to them, which you can't really necessarily understand to experience it, but things that you learned years ago, you go, why am I learning this? And then suddenly today you go, oh, that's connected to this. So I've had students tell me, well, back years ago when that, Howard Hessman, the actor who was Dr. Johnny Fever in WKRP, and then he was also head of the class, I think he was in. I forget what that character's name was, but the students at that time when I was in Milwaukee used to say that I reminded them of him. And I've had students in Chicago that said that they were in philosophy, Mr. Kaz's philosophy class. So my advice to them is to work really hard. Working really hard doesn't get you rich. But I don't think that's what success is. Success is kind of being able to do what you want to do in an honest manner and be able to still survive and helping each other and the world. I would make sure that they understand that mistakes are wonderful. They're fine. And that's the way we learn. And to just keep plugging. You have to have persistence. Persistence is, being, and this is all about this music too. You have to be curious, you have to be creative, and you have to be persistent.
Are there any especially memorable moments in your teaching when a student what fell into place for that student really touched you? Did you see that sometimes?
Oh, it happened all the time. It happened a lot. I mean, it happened all the time when they figure out something and like they suddenly can play it because when we're learning, we're kind of like, it's not
Linear.
It's not linear. It's kind of like steps, and some of the steps go down. Some thanks for the help of the work. This was just recently on the band concert at my school in spring. I was fortunate enough to be able to have the guys from Event Horizon Jazz Quartet come out and play with my beginners, and then they also worked with them. And one of the bass students that I was telling you about, she was playing a duet of a piece with this flautist who was playing great. Well, sounds like a high school student, even though she just started playing this year. And they played great, the two performances during the day. And then the guys, Scott and Rick and Donnie worked with the kids. and she got hung up for the performance with the parents. And I, of course, told them I never get upset when kids make mistakes. And when I was talking to her about this, I said, hey, you don't, before I even was going to explain it to her, I knew what happened. She was trying to do what Donnie had shown her rather. And when you're trying to do something new, you go backwards for a while. And before I finished explaining it to her, she said, yeah, I was trying to do what Don showed me, and I got messed up. And so that this is somebody who gets it, you know.
Mhm. Yes.
The first time they get sound, that's the one that sticks out right now, but there are many over the years that, you know, I'd have to think about them because it.
And of course, you said that you learn and then learn a lot of things, and then later you realize the importance of them. As for chords, I heard that there are so many chords, maybe 4,000 or 5,000 chords. How many do you really have to know in order to play the saxophone, would you say?
How many chords do you have to know?
Yes.
Well,
And it's a chord, almost like a word in music language, would you say?
the way I look at chords, and let's talk about melody and chords because they're linked.
Mhm.
If we're talking about visual art, like a painting, the melody is kind of like the subject of the painting.
Mhm.
You're painting a picture of a tree or a house. The house, that's kind of like the melody. Now there could be all sorts of melodies that fit with the house, like maybe it's, you know, there's a sidewalk or there are trees or there are birds, and the harmony is the environment that the melody lives in. And sometimes the melody works with the harmony, and sometimes it deliberately rubs against the harmony. And so you can, you know, the early, you know, the like Gregorian chant, there really isn't harmony per se, it's monophonic and there's just melody. So you don't really necessarily have to know any chords to play it, to make a melody.
Mhm.
And you don't need, you know, you kind of just need to know enough to be able to say what you want to say. If, you know, because you can, you know, the blue period of Picasso, when they're using different shade, when he was using different shades of blue, or you can, simplicity is not necessarily simple per se. There's a genius in simplicity, because you can figure out a lot of different things to say with not a lot of material. But if you want to express yourself using a lot of different colors, like if we get into what, well, Duke Ellington, of course, but Coltrane did, where he put different harmonies over the underlying harmony, then you need to know more chords. And to actually spell harmony out, you need to know the chords to be able to do it. But folk singers don't necessarily know the chords, and sometimes they only know the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord, and you can play, you know, millions of songs just with those 3 chords.
Mhm.
You know, like, which reminds me of a Beatles story, which any friend of mine knows you can't get through a conversation with me without me talking about the Beatles. But when John and George were kids and they're riding the bus to school, drawing pictures of guitars on it, they knew the E chord and the A chord, the 1 and the 4. And 1/4 means the chord built on Do and the chord built on Fa. So the first note of the scale and the 4th note of the major scale, Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti, Do. And they heard that somebody knew the 5 chord across town, and George and Paul got on a bus and they did several transfers, and they spent several hours trying to find the guy. The guy showed him this chord, and then they went home, but after they memorized it. But it's that drive that made them great. But so you don't really need to know a lot. It's not a matter of knowing a lot of them, it's knowing enough to be able to do what you want to do.
Mhm. Do you play any other instrument besides the saxophone?
Not that anyone would want to hear. not that they'd want to hear. I play saxophone and flute, obviously, and I can play a little bit of clarinet. But then I had to, or I did. I learned a little bit of most of the band instruments, and you know, like trumpet, trombone, French horn, you know, violin, piano, percussion, so that I'm able to teach students it. you know, and so, so all the band instruments. I was fortunate in when I went to undergrad in Milwaukee, you had to take a semester, 2 semesters of trumpet, but there were like 14 semesters of fundies classes you had to take. But I don't even think that was necessarily enough to actually know enough about the instruments. When I got to Illinois and I taught one of the saxophone sections of the woodwind, it was much more condensed. The woodwinds were 1 semester and the brass was another semester. And but it's a never ending process. And there's, but no, saxophone flute is what I play. And I play clarinet occasionally for shows and big band stuff. But
what about artists? Which artists would you like to study under now if you had the chance, because you have already learned from many artists?
Well, as I said earlier, the farther you travel, the less you know. That's from it's a Chinese proverb that George Harrison used, but Bob Dylan said I was so much older than I'm younger than that now. I'm never done learning. The person I would want to study with, and I've actually taken 1 lesson with her already, is Melissa Aldana. She's an amazing saxophonist from Chile, but she lives in New York right now. And she's just amazing. But there's a lot of people I would like to, I'd like to have a lesson with Kenny Werner, the piano player. There are saxophone players around town that I would like to take lessons with, like Chris Madsen. And I learned from everybody. I learned from the guys in the band, so it's endless. But I plan on taking some more lessons with Melissa.
Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of people learn from you as well, Jim Kaczmarek.
Like what not to do.
We could learn a lot from each other with that.
Yeah.
We all make mistakes.
Yeah.
Well, WZRD Chicago, being a nonprofit radio station, must be responsible to the community we serve. WZRD is mandated to file quarterly issues with the FCC on non-entertainment, community-focused programming. We like to assess the community for these quarterly issue topics with 3 questions. So our guests for interviews, they're part of the community. The first question is, what is most important to you? It could be in your career, it could be in your life, whatever is most important to you.
What's most important to me, well, I don't, it's on a personal level, but I wish that everyone could learn to love one another and be much more accepting. Now, I hope that some of, in my journey or my process in trying to be the best musician, composer, teacher, human that I can be, I hope that I model that on some level for my students, but I hope that that process, I hope that I'm also, I want the community at large to spend more time loving and helping each other rather than tearing each other down and being afraid of each other because they're different from us, whether that be their skin color, who they choose to worship, who they identify as, or who they love. I don't understand why that's an issue to anyone, and we would be much better off. I mean, playing in a jazz group, our responsibility is to, when we're not the soloist, and even when we are the soloist, is to make each other sound better and to sound good. And so I think that that's what we should be doing in the world, is making each other sound good or helping each other live the best lives that each and every one of us can do.
That's beautiful. What long-term problem must we address?
I think the hate and the fear. And the hate and the fear is driven by believing lies, because if you're afraid, we go to the irrational part of our brain, and so we don't make wise choices. And so we don't value not only the strength of that we have in diversity. I mean, without biodiversity, everything becomes extinct, but that addressing the climate is imperative for everyone. Nothing will, if one is trying to get rich and that's the only thing that matters, the corporate takeover of everything, and the profit margin is all that matters. The profit won't matter once life is inhabitable on Earth. So I think that is but I think they're all connected. I mean, whether we have more, if we have more human rights and there's more equity and people have there are more people at the table, more people voicing their concerns. In other words, they can vote rather than being stymied from voting. We are going to be able to push things in the correct direction so that we can address education, we can address the climate, we can address, because that's kind of like the way when I think about learning, everything is connected. So, but obviously without the climate, without the earth, that's kind of it. But we need love for that. So.
And finally, what problem must be resolved now?
Well, what I just mentioned, maybe I guess if I pick one specific thing besides the love and the empathy and that, it's the and respect for learning, rather than the situation we're in now, where we reverse engineer everything to what we want to believe rather than to what actually is happening. Maybe the Supreme Court. If I talk about a specific thing, the Supreme Court, which we have to deal with getting community leaders voting from every, I don't like saying down ticket. I don't like saying making value judgments, but every single position is important. And so you need to have people that have integrity, so that, a lot of the way that democracy is supposed to run is with norms and their normal ways of doing things or appropriate ways of doing things. And so you have to have people with integrity to be able to do that, to steer the ship in the right direction. So I guess that's getting people involved. Almost all the important things that happen throughout the history of the world. Again, bottom up is the way to say it, but I don't look at the people that are on the bottom. It's kind of like Howard Zinn's Voices of the People's History of the United States. We need to have more of the people involved to get things going the right direction.
This is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM. Well, thank you so much, Jim Kaczmarek, and for joining us on WZRD and sharing your insights on music and life with us. And also, thank you, Bill Morton, for joining us at WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM today.
Thank you very much. Nice talking to you and nice talking to Bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Be safe. Thank you. Oh, wait. Jim, before we go, are there any events that you want to share with our listeners? Any upcoming events?
Yeah. This coming Friday, the 22nd, we are on the Riverwalk at Northman here in Cider Garden from 3 until 5 o'clock. It's free. It's beautiful out there. The weather is supposed to be sunny in the 80s, and you'll hear some of the music off our record and some of the stuff that's coming up new. So that'll be very fun. You can go to eventhorizonband.net. That's EVENTHORIZON.net. And that's our where our website is. You can find videos, you can sample things, you can buy our CD, there's a calendar there, and you can even give us your email, and then you will be on an email list, and we'll let you know where else we're playing. We're going to be playing at Montrose Saloon in a while, and we're at Mirman's Playhouse in Indiana, but the Friday would be cool to see everyone come out at Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim Kaczmarek, and thank you, Bill Morton. Have a good
Take
day.
care. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you.